This video is on verifying trig identities, and these problems are taken from the 11th edition of the Barnett Trig book. And so number 1 says to verify that the tangent of x plus the cotangent of x is equal to the secant of x times the cosecant of x. And so when I'm verifying an identity, I'm going to start with one side of the equation and use algebra and identities until I can make it look like the other side of the equation. So I'm choosing to start with the left side. I'm going to break these down into sine and cosine. So the tangent is defined to be the sine of x over the cosine of x, and the cotangent is defined to be the cosine of x over the sine of x. And so I'm not sure what to do, but one thing you can do is you can find the lowest common denominator and add these fractions together. So the lowest common denominator would be the cosine of x times the sine of x. And so in order to get this, I'd have to multiply this times the sine of x. I have to multiply this times the cosine of x. And so I'm going to do that. That would give me sine squared of x plus the cosine squared of x, and that's one of the Pythagorean identities, and that's equal to 1 over the cosine of x times the sine of x. You can think of this as 1 over the cosine of x times 1 over the sine of x, and 1 over the cosine of x is the secant of x, and 1 over the sine of x is the cosecant of x. And so that now looks like this side right here. Okay, here is the second example I'm going to do. This says the cosecant of x over the cotangent of x plus the tangent of x is equal to the cosine of x. So I'm going to break all of this down into sines and cosines. So this is going to be 1 over the sine of x over the cosine of x over the sine of x plus the sine of x over the cosine of x. And this is a complex fraction. So I'm just going to simplify this complex fraction. One method of simplifying a complex fraction is to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the lowest common denominator. In the lowest common denominator of sine x, and cosine x, the denominators that I see would be the sine x times the cosine of x. I'm going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by that. It will distribute to each term in the denominator, so I'm just going to write it again over here and I can watch it distribute. When I multiply 1 over the sine x times the sine x cosine x over 1, what's going to happen is that this sine x will divide into that sine x one time. In the numerator I have 1 times cosine of x over 1 times 1, and the entire numerator just becomes a cosine of x. In the denominator, sine x times cosine x over 1 times cosine x over sine x, these will cancel. I get a cosine of x times a cosine of x, which gives me cosine squared of x plus, and this is still in the denominator. I wrote that poorly. Okay, over here, sine of x over cosine x times sine x cosine x over 1. Cosine will divide into cosine once. I'm left with sine x, or sine squared x over 1. Cosine squared x plus sine squared x is a Pythagorean identity, and it's equal to 1. So this is just simply equal to the cosine of x. And now the left-hand side looks like the right-hand side.